All right, so we're going to look at quarterback ratings. So this little blurb right here kind of explains the concept of it, and then this nice, beautiful equation down here is what we're going to use for quarterback rating. So of course, you're never going to have to learn to memorize this. You'll have this with open notes on tests, quizzes, all that fun stuff. But before we dive into solving any of the problems, we have to understand the components of this equation. So a lot of this stuff does kind of seem random, but the big stuff is going to be these percentages that we have to plug in. So we need to figure out what these percentages mean and how to calculate them. So our first one is comp, and that's just our completions per attempt. So the way that that's going to look, a completion is when a quarterback throws a ball and it is caught by either a receiver, tight end, or running back. So the way to get that percentage is how many completions that they have. We divide that by how many times they throw the ball. So let's say a quarterback throws the ball 10 times. He completes it 7% of the time. You would have 7 over 10 right there, so 70% would be his completion percentage. Next one is touchdown passes per attempt. So, of course, the touchdown is when they cross the goal line and score. So, obviously, this number will be a lot less because not every time a quarterback throws a ball, it's going to be a touchdown. But we'll take how many of the total touchdowns we have, divide that by 10. So, let's say divide that by our attempts. So let's say after 20 passes, he has 2 touchdowns. That'll be 2 divided by 20. Interceptions when quarterback throws the ball and the other team intercepts it. So that's not what we want. So that's what our percentage is there. We'll take the number of interceptions, divide that by attempts. And lastly is average yards per attempt. So we're going to take our average yards and divide that by attempts. So let's say he throws for 70 yards after 12 passes. We'd have 70 divided by 12, his number of attempts, and then we'll get our answer there. So notice that attempts is always the numerator, so attempts is always the numerator. So that's something to keep in mind when we go through and get our percentage. After we get our percentage, we just plug it into that formula right there, and we will get our answer. All right, so if we look at number 1 here, it gives us that 2 games. Gives us the stats of Tony Romo, and we need to figure out what his QBR is after these games. So each of these bullet points take us through what we need to figure out first, and then plug those numbers into that nice formula that we had, and we'll figure out what his QBR is going to be. So if we read our problem, it says 45 of 62 attempts. So we're going to use 62 as our denominator for all of this, which reminds me in the problem before I said it's always the numerator. This is actually always the denominator, so we always divide by the attempts there. So sorry for the confusion there, but 62 is always going to be your denominator. But we're going to take our 45, divide that by 62, and multiply times 100. So keep in mind that's a percentage that we're getting. So when we do that, we're going to get 72.5. We're going to do the same thing. Also keep in mind to say right here to the nearest tenth. But we're going to do the same thing with with touchdown. So he threw 4 touchdowns over those 62 attempts. And we're going to get 6.4. If we look at interceptions, that's 2 interceptions he threw. So that's going to give me 3.2. And then his yards. So we're going to take his total yards, which is 632, and divide that by 62. So this one we're not going to multiply by 100. So keep in mind, as you see, we don't see a percentage there in the YD, which stands for yards. So that's 10.2. So every time he threw the ball, the offense was averaging getting 6.2 there. So after you get this, we can plug it into that formula. So we're going to have 25 plus 10 times our completion percentage, which is 72.5. So see how I'm putting, or we should see that I'm putting in the entire percentage there, not putting in a decimal in terms of it being like 0.75. Our next part, we have plus 40, which is our touchdowns, which is 6.4. So that's 40. Just make sure that we have that correct. So 40 times our 6.2 minus our interception, which is 3.2, and then plus our 50 times our yards, which is 10.2. So what I would do, I would plug all of that into my calculator, get an answer, and then lastly divide that answer by 12. When you do that, you should get 113.3. So that was Tony Romo's QBR during that stretch of 2 games. All right, so I want you to try number 2 on your own right here. So it says Steve Young has the highest career quarterback rating in NFL history. So keep in mind this is over his entire career. So it gives us the stats to do that. So I want you to try this on your own. So you're going to have to get the completion percentage. So we're going to have to divide completions by attempts, touchdowns, so that touchdowns by attempt, interceptions, so we'll divide that by attempts, and then yards. So I want you to get all of those numbers, plug it into your formula, and get an answer. So pause this video and try this one on your own. All right, so here's the math on how to get all of the percentages. So completions divided by attempts, touchdowns completed by attempt or divided by attempts, our interceptions divided by attempts, and then of course yards by attempts. So when we do all of that, here is the percentages that we get. We're going to plug it into our formula like I did there, and we're going to get 96.3. So Tony Romo's was nice over the course of the 2 games. This is over Steve Young's entire career. I don't know off the top of my head how many years he played, but he played for a while. So that's pretty good QBR for your entire year, especially as long as he played. Number 3 wants you to look up Dak Prescott, so that's something that would change year by year. But something that's important to see with QBR. So with slugging percentage, we should see that technically 4 is the biggest number we could get. So if you hit nothing but home runs, your slugging percentage is going to be 4. If we do batting average, the biggest number could be is 1. So if you just get a hit every time you go at bat. With QBR, it's a little different. This little part right here explains the math through it. But what we should see is that the largest number you can get in QBR is 158.3. So there's no reason you should, if you type this into your calculator, if you get like 300 and something, that doesn't make sense. You went wrong either plugging it in or getting one of these percentages here. But that's just something to note that 158.3 is the max QBR that we can get, and you should never get anything more than that. But that's going to wrap up our lesson here. So we had 2 sports themed lessons there. This was looking at batting average. If you're being tested on this, it's going to be open notes, which is going to work out pretty nicely, so you don't have to ever worry about memorizing these formulas. But it'd be good to get some practice to know how to get of our percentage and all that fun stuff with these as well. So that's going to wrap up this lesson here.